Alrighty, so I will have the chat open. If you should have any questions or concerns, feel free to use the chat or the Q&A function, and I can respond in time when you have the question. So again, my name is Loyola Rankin. I am one of the college success coaches here at the American Indian College Fund. Thank you so much for being here at the 5th Annual Summer of Success Conference. So technically, you already attended a conference. So workshops and goals. The workshop goals for today is I will showcase some Native American national conferences that might be of interest to you, and provide an outline of pre-attending and post-conference items to consider. Agenda is very quick, very simple. It's the presentation slides and then a Q&A at the end. So first off, we have here a list of 9 different Native American focused conferences that either recently taken place or are upcoming. So you have up there the Native American Fish and Wildlife Society. So for those of you that are considering going into environmental sciences, habitatory, or any type of programming where fish and wildlife is considered, you may want to go to the Fish and Wildlife Society. Of course, the one this year, the 2024 conference, just took place, so you're going to have to plan for the 2025 conference next year. We also have a couple of them different items here: the Student Advocacy Institute, the Indigenous Media Conference, ACES, Science and Engineering Society, the Indian Education Association, the Land Grant Consortium, Alaskan Federation of Natives, and Society for the Advancement of Chicanos, Hispanics, and Native Americans in the Sciences. So definitely take a look at the conferences and see which one might be of interest to you. Of course, there are many, many different conferences. These are just the 9 that I think were well attended, are huge, people know about them, and the dates and where they are located this year, the 2024 year, are listed there as well. So you might consider something that is a little closer, just depending on where you're currently located. So like for me here in the Southwest, if I had to choose between going to ACES or SACNAS, I probably would choose, well, actually they're both like equally far apart from Albuquerque, just in opposite directions. Probably Phoenix, because I have an aunt there and I can stay with her. But I've never been to San Antonio, so that might also weigh in on my decision of which conference to go to. So these are the conferences that I selected. And of course, like I said, there are many, many more. Any type of conference you can think of, they exist. Technically, Comic-Con is a conference. So definitely think of your industry, your field, your profession, and what conference you would like to go to. They have mathematics conferences. They have conferences for anything you can think of. I've already said that. Okay, so what I'd like for you to do is grab a pen and paper or some type of writing utensil recording. This could be your phone, it could be your laptop, anything that will help you take notes. And I would like for you to pick one of these conferences. Pick one. Like I said, you can use any method that you would like. You've never been there. It's right up in your city. Or it's a conference that it's like, yeah, that's right into my major. That's exactly what I want to do after I graduate from college. Should lean more towards that last one, honestly. But we are going to plan to attend that specific conference coming up. So, okay, let's go for it. All right, the pre-conference. This is where we do a lot of the heavy lifting. I'm not going to lie. So things to consider. You want to consider location, speakers, schedule, costs, and the social media account of the conference you're planning on attending. Location is big, of course. Not only is it somewhere that you might have to travel to, but you also have to consider the weather situation of the year that, or of the time of the year that you're planning on going. So for example, if you were going to attend a conference in Denver in the summer, you're probably not gonna like it because there are a ton of people in Denver in the summer. You can't find a hotel. It's very congested with people who love to vacation in Denver. Similarly, if you have an aversion to snow and there's a conference in November in Minneapolis, um, might not want to go to Minneapolis in November. So definitely think about where the location is. If it plays a bigger factor in your decision, that's fine. But definitely take it into consideration because that'll also be a label where you need to consider what you're packing. Um, so uh, Location is definitely important as well, depending on how far away it is from you because of the financial strain that might be included with distance. But we'll talk about that a little bit more. Additionally, speakers, who's going to be speaking at the conference is a big one. As you probably saw this earlier today, we had Deb Holland do a recording for us, and it was beautifully done. I thought it was so cool to hear from Deb Holland talk specifically to the attendees at this conference. You might also find that an author you've read in, excuse me, an author you've read in class is going to be at a conference, and you're like, I really enjoyed their work. I would love to hear more about what they have to say. Um, that is perfectly fine too. Consider that type of interaction in that professional environment. You want to look at the schedule. Of course, not just like what is happening at the conference, like the day, is it happening over the weekend? Is it during the middle of the weekday? You also want to look at your personal schedule too. Do you need to provide, a sitter? Do you need to make any arrangements at work? With your class schedule, like, do you need to let your faculty know that you're going to be attending a conference in October, so you might not be in class at that time? Or is there a final going on that week and you're like, well, it's either I take my final early, or not final, sorry, midterm. If there's a midterm going on that week, do you need to take your midterm early, later? Can you take it remotely while you're at the conference? That would be less ideal, but definitely something to consider. So looking at the schedule and your schedule and see how well that could mesh. Costs are a big one, to looking at the financial budget of attending the conference. We're going to go into that in a couple of slides here of how to break down costs of what you're attending. And social media, definitely checking out the social media accounts of the conference hosts is always helpful. You never know when they could hold promotions or different types of pushes for events. So for an example, at this conference, we had certain days selected in that if you registered on that day, you got entered into a raffle. So we posted those on our social media accounts, definitely something that was just a fun thing to do on our side, I think. So these are some things to consider when you're looking at conferences and where you would like to go and where you would like to invest your time. The big thing here is to look for professional development opportunities. You want to invest your time and funding so you can increase your own investment in yourself. So that's one thing to consider inside of these spaces too, when you're looking at conferences. Alrighty, so those are some things to consider. Here we're going to create a budget of to attend a conference. So you picked your conference from that first slide. So now we're going to try and see if we can create a rough outline of a budget on where that conference is located and how you're going to get there. Not all conferences are in person. Some are virtual, like the one now, but definitely moving more and more towards like in person after the pandemic. So things to consider are things like transportation. Are you going to drive? Are you going to fly? Is it a ride share situation, a shuttle situation? Are you going to take public transportation? Again, depending on where it's located, these might be different options. We do have a lot of conferences that take place here in Albuquerque. So I would most likely drive because it's within the city. If I wanted to go out to California, I would weigh the options between driving to California and then flying to California, and different costs associated with both options. So if you're driving, that's gas, that's upkeep on your vehicle. That's also a time budget too. So if it takes me 15 hours to drive from Albuquerque to California, um, I then attend the conference. It's then going to take me 15 hours to drive back. So do I want to add on an extra 30 hours just driving? Is that feasible for me? Is that an ideal situation, especially with other things going on in my life? Or is it just going to make me too tired to function? Those are things to consider when you're looking at transportation. Sometimes taking a flight might be easier, but you also have to look at transportation from the airport to the location of the conference. Is there a shuttle provided? Are you going to take a ride share? There also is public transportation options. Not all cities have the infrastructure for public transportation to meet your needs, but some do. And so that's something to consider when you're looking at attending a conference, especially in larger cities. If there's a conference in New York, public transportation is a little better there. It's a little more manageable and acceptable. So definitely consider the transportation costs in your budget. Next up is the lodging. A lot of conferences will have a host hotel. So the hotel will have a conference center, rooms dedicated to the conference specifically. And it's a lot easier to stay in the hotel the conference is being hosted at. You don't have to go outside. You don't have to find transportation. Your room is 10 minutes away at most. Helpful. If those fill up, because they tend to, just depending on how large the conference is, there are also nearby hotels. Consider looking at different hotel opportunities that are near where the conference is taking place. If the conference is at a convention center, that's a little different as well. So looking at hotels in the neighboring area. Of course, you want to be safe. You want to make sure that you are being safe. That's the big thing. And of course, couch surfing. Like I said, I do have an aunt in Phoenix, so most likely I would stay with her if I were to attend a conference in the area. I'm sure she would be okay with me staying on her couch for a couple of days and then heading out. So that's also an option. It's something we used to do in undergrad a lot, but not always feasible. So definitely take into consideration the lodging opportunities that are available to you. The other thing to consider on the budget is meals. So typically, if the conference is rather large, couple of thousand people, and the cost to attend is rather high, more likely meals are going to be included. You can't always say that they will be included, but you definitely want to make sure that you're checking the schedule and the agenda to see if meals are covered in the costs. Typically, it'll be breakfast and lunch. If they are included, I haven't really seen a lot that include dinner included in the cost with the conference, just because dinner is more expensive. I don't know why, but it is. But yeah, definitely look at if meals are included with costs. And it might not be included all 3 days or however many days the conference is taking place. That's also another thing to consider. Meals might be only provided the first 2 days and not the last day because they don't expect a lot of people to be around on the last day. It does happen. The other thing to consider when you're looking at the conference budget is planning meals near the conference location. So if meals are not included in the conference, um, typically the restaurants in the hotels, in the convention center, like the Starbucks, the cafe nearby, they are going to be slammed with people. So it might take some time to get to a food source, a food option. So it's always helpful to take a look around the local area to see if there's anything available that you could go to that you know the location of. Just in case, there's a long line at one particular location, you can find another easily, and that's accessible to you. Some other things that come up that I forgot to include in here is the registration costs. Like I said, with the meals, you do have a cost with attending uh, the conference. Typically, like this virtual conference is free. We do have to say that because not all conferences are free to attend. So definitely look into the costs of attending by the registration. Additionally, there's the unexpected costs, forgotten items. These do add up. I cannot tell you how many lint rollers I've bought simply because I forgot to pack them. Toothbrushes, like toothpaste, these things do happen, but you always want to make sure that you're planning when you're packing. So that way it's helpful. So you don't have to have incurred costs, but it does happen. So make sure to include that in your budget as well, just to give you a little breathing room on your finances. Parking fees, hotels, and especially hotels in like a downtown area, just depending on where the conference is located, may have parking fees. So if your typical city or where you're located, that's not typical, just be aware that that might happen and to include that into your costs. Of course, if you're not planning on bringing a vehicle, you don't have to worry about parking fees because you don't have a vehicle. It works out. Highway tolls. So this is a big one, especially if you travel to a different state. If you are unfamiliar with highway tolls, they can be a little tricky. So it's always helpful to take a look and see what the tolls are. Again, if you're not driving, it's not a big deal. Don't even have to include it, but it is something to consider. I've definitely attended a couple of conferences in Florida, and that always throws me for a loop. I'm like, oh, dang, I forgot they have tolls again. um, and then, of course, tipping. Tipping is a little different. It's a cultural thing for sure, just depending on where you're at. It might be expected to tip more or to not tip at all. Just depending on where you're going. I think in California, I think it's more common, especially if you use valet parking. If you ask the front desk to hold your room, it's not your room, sorry, your bags, should you want to check out of your room and then go explore the city, but not take your bags with you. Typically they not ask, but there's a tip involved. It's an unspoken kind of thing. Tipping your cab driver, should you decide to take a cab. Those things do incur, so definitely keep that in mind when you're building and constructing your budget. Okay, so moving on. So right now we have our budget. You have the conference you're planning on attending, and so you've kind of like outlined a budget, hopefully like $300 for a flight, $50 for a ride share to the conference or to the conference location. All right, so we're going to move on now to funding options. So now that you have a budget, and this is kind of where that budget is going to help, is now you can look for funding sources and options. And having a budget really helps make the case of the funding needed. So very rarely, if ever, is someone going to hand you a blank check and say, have at it, write down whatever amount you want. Typically they're going to want like an outline of what it's going to cost to get you to attend. So that's where the budget comes in handy. So you can take the budget once you've like finalized it, outlined it a little bit more, cleaned it up, and go to these funding sources and say, this is what I'm expecting. This is the funding I have currently. I'm looking for additional funding resources. First off, you can pay for it out of pocket. That's always an option. Your personal finances, you can use that to go to conferences. Depending on where it's located, like I said, I'm here in Albuquerque, so it's a little bit more feasible for me to go to a conference. If registration is $800 and it's still in Albuquerque, that's a little bit higher than I'm willing to pay out of pocket. But we can always look at different resources. We can look at resources. So there's always fundraising, of course, if that's an option for you. You always can have that as an option, fundraising for to attend a professional development conference. That's great. You can look at department faculty. Typically, if you are an English major and you want to go to ACES because it's in, Texas and you've never been to Texas, and you go to the STEM department, they're not going to pay for you. That's typically not how that works. But if you're a STEM major, an engineer major, and you want to go to ACES, and you can talk to your faculty because you've taken like 3 classes with them in the past 2 years, that might be a little bit more helpful, if they know you a little bit more, if you've talked to your faculty, if you've taken multiple classes with them, they know your hard work. They're more likely to invest that you can go to a conference. Not saying that that's guaranteed. None of this is ever guaranteed, but it could be an option. It could be an option. They might encourage you to talk to the department chair. So depending on how your college operates, you could go to the department chair directly and ask for funding to attend a conference, as long as it's within your professional sphere, within your major, within what you plan to do after you graduate college. Typically, they'll invest in that type of opportunity for you. You could go to the academic dean. That's the highest of the high level tier. Again, would utilize these other methods first before going directly to an academic dean for funding. But that is a possibility. Again, no two colleges operate exactly the same way. So definitely consider your unique situation before approaching people for funding. The other opportunity is to let your student success advisor know, or your academic advisor know, that you're planning on attending a conference and that you are looking for funding resources. You've outlined the budget, you've gotten like quotes for the flight, for the hotel costs. You haven't booked them yet, but you got the quotes. And they might be able to direct you into another location, like financial aid. That could be an option. If not, you can ask the student services dean if there is any funding available to support you with your professional development to attend a conference. Again, depending on your college, depending on the institution, it's a little different for each one. So definitely keep that in mind on the resources and opportunities available. The other option too is to do early bird registration. So like I said, you do have to pay to attend some conferences. Typically, well, not typically, I shouldn't say that. Sometimes they will have early bird registration. So if you register, months in advance, there's a discount on the registration costs. So instead of $700, it's $650. If you register 4 months before the conference, that type of thing. So there's that option too, to kind of save funding. The other option too is that some conferences will have student registration. So if you are in undergrad or graduate school, student registration is an option sometimes. Typically it is significantly discounted, so that is always a great resource. So like, let's say regular attendance is $100 and then student registration's like 50. That's not like a one-to-one, but typically it's significantly discounted. Um, so that might be an option that can happen. They could have early bird student registration. So instead of $50, it's $25 if you register 5 months out. Um, each conference is different, is what I'm trying to get at. So definitely take a look at the conference information as soon as it becomes available. Some conferences do offer a scholarship. This is where looking at their social media and following them on social media helps, because you can select to apply for a conference scholarship. Again, not all conferences have that, but if they do, it's something you do want to try for. Um, Follow along their social media so that way they can promote it out, and yeah, you can apply for that. Finally, we have the last tier here of excuse me, professional development grants. So the College Fund does offer a student professional development grant. Um, uh, it's overseen by oh my gosh, Anna Marie Stevens. Not like she's my colleague or anything. So I'll put her chat, or sorry, I'll put her email in the chat. So collegefund.org. So professional development grants are funding to support you in developing yourself professionally, and a conference is a place that you can do that, which is helpful for the grant type. Grants are funding that you do not have to pay back. So definitely consider looking for professional development grants as an option. I would also encourage reaching out to tribal scholarship offices. They might not have funding specifically, but they may know different departments that do. And it's always helpful to kind of like make that connection and see what resources are available to you to attend a conference. Like I said, these are just some suggestions for funding options, just depending on your unique situation and the communities that you're from. They might be feasible, they might not, but planning to attend a conference months out is always best. And that's kind of why I included this, the list of conferences that are upcoming. So as you can see, there's some in June over the summer and one in July, and then immediately jumps to October for the last 5 there at the bottom. There's really not like a conference season, but for some reason, conferences specifically with Native Americans in mind, they fall in October. I think it has to do with the fiscal calendar of some sort. I think the end of the fiscal calendar is October for some people. Um, I do not know. So yeah, so those are funding options to look at and consider while you're planning. Okay, so moving on. So we planned for the conference, we did everything we could, and now we are at the conference. All right, sounds great. Woo! Okay, so while at a conference, first and foremost, there's the conference check-in. This is typically a booth where you will receive your name tag and any additional information regarding the conference itself, any changes, any updates. Um, Oftentimes there'll be swag items. There'll also be like conference ribbons where you can customize your badge. Those are always fun. Just depending on the type of conference you go to, like they'll have a lot of really cool things, I think. Um, it is always advisable that you have your registration number or at least confirmation email on hand. It only happened to me one time, but I swear like it's helpful if you keep your registration confirmation with you while you're checking in. So this just confirms that you're there and that you received your materials to attend. Um, Keynotes. So keynotes are held throughout the conference. These are typically the large assembly gatherings, most likely held first thing in the morning and then at lunch is when the keynotes typically take place. So if you were here at the 3 o'clock keynote, you heard from some amazing speakers. Like I said, there's not really a one-to-one individual conversation happening. It's just someone sharing out their personal experiences in relation to the topic that is being covered at the conference. Keynotes are great. They're a great way to feel inspired, a great way to hear about large trends that are happening inside the industry. Um, so definitely keep an eye out for keynotes. They're pretty amazing resources. And you might be thinking like, oh, it's a large assembly. No one will care if I'm here. I will just duck out and go do my own thing. If you need to, that's fine. This is your opportunity. I would encourage to definitely attend the keynotes. They're pretty great. They work really hard on selecting keynotes, and yeah, they're awesome. Um, Sessions and workshops. So this is also happening throughout the conference. We're currently in the last session, the last workshop for this conference. And you've probably been able to attend the past 2 days and hear all the different sessions that have been running on. These multiple workshops are running concurrently. So while we're talking, there are other people in the next room talking about an entirely different topic. What tends to happen when you go to these conferences is that you may be interested in attending multiple sessions. And just depending on your strategy to get the most out of a conference, you may decide that you want to hop around from different rooms and hear a little bit about what's going on in each room. Um, that's perfectly fine. If that's a good way for you to absorb information, fantastic. Go with it, run with it, do your thing. If you're more like me, who's like, I need to be there from beginning to end because I can't jump into a conversation midway through and still get the most out of it, it can be difficult. Not that it can't be done, but it can be difficult to jump in on the middle of a session and not know how we got to that point in topic, especially in these workshops and sessions, which can be so, what's the word I'm thinking of? Gosh, now I can't remember it. So specific. That's not the word I wanted, but that's the word I'm using. Especially these workshops can be so specific on a specific topic. So yeah, so definitely plan your strategy on how you want to attend the different sessions and workshops. Social activities. So a lot of conferences will have evening social activities, places for people to gather and get to know one another, engage with each other. Definitely check to see if these activities have an RSVP to attend or if there's an additional charge to attend, because you want to make sure that if you are planning on going to this social activity that you see to it beforehand, because space does run out on a lot of these RSVP to attend events. They're a great way to network, to meet other people, to explore, and they're a lot of fun sometimes. So definitely think about it if you are interested in it. Some conferences with Native American attendees in mind will have powwows. So typically, those are free to attend. So, but definitely think about it if that's something that you're interested in. Okay, and then finally for this slide, we have the pre-conference workshops. So pre-conference, that happens before the conference, but it's at the end of this slide. Don't ask me why I did that. I'm not entirely sure. So the pre-conference workshops are optional workshops that you can attend. These are typically an additional cost to attend and they start before the conference even begins. These are strongly topical of the industry types of workshops. They're significantly longer as well. Your typical conference workshop might be like 50 minutes, maybe 120, sorry, uh 90, no, yeah, 120 minutes. Um, these ones can go up for like 5 hours. um, Sometimes you can receive some type of certification at a pre-conference workshop. Um, but not always. So that is something that's optional. And again, if that's something that you're interested in, that is very topical to your interest in the field, definitely consider attending and definitely plan on including it in your budget. Alrighty, so things to consider. Some things we want to consider when we're looking at the conference and being in this space is your attire. What are you wearing to the conference? Professional conferences, things that are part of a job or a career, you want to wear business attire. Button-up shirts, slacks, no jeans, no t-shirts if possible, a blazer or a cardigan. And that is, again, typically something you want to look at beforehand because you want to plan accordingly on what kind of clothes you want to bring. Um, Student focused conferences are typically business casual. So if they have a lot of undergrad or graduate students attending, just depending on where they are in their career. Typically, it'll be business casual, but you always want to dress in some type of standard above casual. So not formal like black tie, but just nice. Wear your nicest clothes, I guess. Um, your social battery. This is another thing to consider. If you are introverted, extroverted, or both, some combination of both, um, please keep in mind your social capacity and pace yourself throughout the day. This is solid time of engaging with other people, being around strangers, um, like mentally, cognitively, like focusing in on a topic for extended periods of time. So your battery might deplete faster than typical. So you always want to make sure that you have snacks on hand, you have a space that you want to sit for a little bit to like recharge if that's how you recharge. Yeah, so just keep in mind your social battery when you're attending these spaces. Um, Talking to speakers and panelists. So it's always helpful to learn about the speaker and the panelists before going to the conference. If that information is present, that's fantastic. Because you can better understand where they are talking from, what their experience has been, and you can better understand their presentation. Sometimes it gets very specific with the presentations. There are a lot of like inside information that you're like, I had no clue that was even happening. And this is kind of like where that conference element is great because you can see what's happening, same field of study, but at different locations and say, like, we've never considered doing that. Maybe that'll work here, or that won't work in the desert, but that's cool that it's working in Washington. That type of understanding is always helpful because then you can understand and say, like, well, this conference wasn't meant for me and I'm not having a great time. Um, but this does happen. But it's always helpful to understand where they're coming from and learn about how the industry that you're both at works in different spaces, whether that's education, fish and wildlife, STEM fields. It's always helpful. Asking questions. So always feel free to ask a question that is thoughtful to better understand the topic that is presented. Please be mindful of the time you're taking when asking the question. I think we're all familiar with someone who prefaces the question with 20 minutes of personal life and then finally asks their question, but it's not really a question, it's like a statement. Um, yeah, just be mindful of how you're asking questions and bettering and understanding the topic that was presented. Those are always helpful, especially if you're moving the conversation to another level of topic, or something that the presenter might not have considered when presenting. That's always helpful too. Choosing a session. So this is also can be done in the pre-conference when you're looking at the schedule, when you're looking at the agenda. Highlight session titles that sound interesting to you, and then filter out sessions by the abstract information that's listed. That way you can finalize which sessions you'd like to go to. Not gonna lie, I've definitely been bamboozled a couple of times where I'm like, this session title is amazing. This sounds so good. The abstract is great. This is exactly what I'm looking for. And then you go, and then it's like, that wasn't as awesome as I thought it was going to be. Which does happen, and that's okay. You can find a way to like look at a backup session or have an opportunity to, be like, thank you, this isn't what I'm looking for, and move on to another session happening at the same time. It can be tricky, but it can be done. Yes, it can. Networking. Okay, so networking, this is a great opportunity to network. It's super hard for some people, especially if you don't like making small talk or talking to strangers. It can be difficult. I will admit that. But you always want to try. You want to try engaging in small talk or asking questions about their experiences because you're at the same conference. Like your interests are similar. So for example, going to NASI, the Native American student advocacy, I can understand that people there are passionate about education. They want to work hard for their students. They want to engage and find best methods to help students succeed. I also have that. So we have that in common. So we have common ground. Building on that is a little easier. So you can always ask, like, oh, what, school are you representing? Or what's your career like? Or like, how did you get into student advocacy work? Those are always helpful. Same thing with fish and wildlife of like, what type of fishery do you work at? Or have you heard the big news in fish news? I don't know what big news and fish news is, honestly. Probably that like doorbell thing in, I want to say like one of the Slavic countries, right? Where there's like a fish doorbell and you go onto the website and you push a button and it shoots the fish up the river. I don't know. That's the fish news I know. Anywho, off topic. So it's always great to network and engage in small talk. How are you liking the conference or what sessions did you go to? And always feel free to exchange contact information when possible and when you feel comfortable and safe to do so. Uh, First couple of conferences I was going to, I was handing out like business cards like candy. I was like, there you go, there you go, there you go. And then people would reach out to me and I'm like, I have no idea who you are. So it's helpful to be a little strategic when you're handing out business cards of like, oh, we're having a great conversation that started off like around a session. Um, Let me give you my business cards. I think we could do a collaborative event, or they tell me about a scholarship and I'm like, dang, that's great. I'm not going to remember the scholarship, but let me give you my business card and we'll be in contact. Like we'll make something happen. Um, but also speaking about candy, it's always nice to have candy on hand. That's one of my tips of like going to a conference. I always have like a giant pack of gum, and that's my conversation starter. I'm like, I'll take out a gum, start chewing it. And like if there's anyone around me, I'm like, would you care for a piece of gum? And most times people say yes. I feel like it's that thing in high school when you're like, oh, you have a gum? Can I have one? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. But yeah, so that's a tip for networking and getting the conversation started. It's hard, it's a soft skill, but you can do it. I believe in you. You can do this. Alrighty, so post-conference. All right, we got 5 minutes left. Post-conference. After the conference has happened, you're home, you're safe, you got all the information you needed, you feel great. So the post-conference is couple of things is following up. Be sure to send up a follow-up email to contacts you made at the conference. This could be as simple as an email of like, hey, we met at ACES. We talked about, a scholarship when we were standing in line for nachos. I just want to let you know, here's the link to the website for that scholarship. So it's not only about like what information you can take, but also what information you can give. So that's also one of the great things about the conference too, is you could be a contact for somebody else. You can also send them a connect, plus connect thing, friendship thing. It's called connect on LinkedIn. It's called like add a friend request everywhere else. But you can send this to speakers you found particularly inspiring. You can send this to contacts that you're interested in. If you go to a conference where there is not a specific focus on Indigenous communities, so like it's like predominantly non-natives conference, and you see another native, it is exhilarating. Sorry to put it that way, but I'm like, here's my card, here's my contact information. Let's meet up on LinkedIn. Like you're friends like that. It's fun. So that could be part of the follow-up. That could be part of the follow-up. Thank you notes. So thank you notes are always helpful and always appreciated, especially when you send them to people who funded your travel. So if your, faculty advisor connected you to a grant, make sure to send them a thank you note and be like, hi, I was able to attend, such and such conference, and I learned X, Y, and Z. Thank you for your support. Or if your, I don't know, council delegate put aside funding for you to go to a conference or a special grant, send them a thank you note. It doesn't have to be super personalized. Like it just could just be like, thank you so much for this opportunity and the funding. I went to this conference on this date. This is what I learned. Thank you. Sign your name. And it's just acknowledging that they helped and supported you. And it doesn't have to be monetary support and thank yous either. You can just say, thank you for letting me know this conference exists. Like, that's pretty cool. Had a great time. This is what I learned. That's always helpful too, because you're also building relationships that way too, which is something that'll benefit you in your professional career. And just like in everyday life, it's always nice to show gratitude. All right, so like let's say you had a blast at the conference and you're like, I can't wait till next year. Perfect. Put it in your calendar. Let's start planning. Let's get you to that conference again next year. It's not going to be the exact same, but it could be even better. Put the dates, the location in your calendar so that way you don't forget the conference is coming up, because years go by fast. Like I think we can all agree they keep going by fast. The last thing here for the post conference. If you want to be a presenter, I think that is perfectly fine. That is going to be fantastic. Sign up for that conference's newsletters, their emails, like I said, their social media. They will send out these things called call for presenters. Typically it'll happen a few months after the conference you just attended. Like the turnaround on these things is so fast. They want to start getting prepared for next year's conference. So they're going to start asking for presenters to submit proposals. And there's no age limit, honestly. Like, I don't think there's an age limit. I've never seen an age limit on a conference proposal submission. I've seen high schoolers present. I've seen, kids present, like they're with adults, of course, but that can happen. So definitely think about not only like what the industry and your field of study is doing, but also what you're doing and how you can present that to the greater audience. And that's always helpful too, because you're sharing your skill sets, you're sharing something that might be helpful to others. All righty, so we are right at 5:50. It took a little longer. I am going to open it up to any questions or concerns. I don't see anything in the chat or the Q&A box. But I'm happy to hang around here. If you want to speak one-on-one, that's also a great opportunity. Um, when you have speakers, always feel free to hang around at the end and see if they want to chat for a little bit. That's helpful too, to get that one-on-one experience, especially if you have like a particularly like detailed question. Um, it's helpful to have that presence. Uh, oh yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Marcelo. Thank you, Brendan. I appreciate y'all being here. Hopefully this has been helpful. Um, if you want to go to a conference, you can do it. You can present. It's going to be fabulous. All right, so I think we're going to close out the day. Feel free to jump on over to the end of day wrap up with Taylor Lynn. Thank you all so much. I'm just going to hang out here, like I said, for a few minutes and see if there's any questions, but feel free to exit the room if you'd like.